Welcome to The Real Market with Chris Rising, the only podcast that brings the real estate conference panel to your headphones. You'll hear from superstars from every realm of commercial real estate, the biggest brokers, the most well-known architects, the largest investors, and the most visionary developers. We'll learn what they do, how they do it, and what drives their success. We'll discuss the latest trends across regional markets, capital flows, both national and global, and we'll explore technology's role in shaping all of them. We'll take a clear-eyed look at where we've been, where we are now, and what's to come. Real conversations, real experts, real insights. This is The Real Market. Welcome to The Real Market with Chris Rising. I'm really excited today. I've had Tyler Kastelberg with me. He has made a big difference in my life, and it's the topic we're going to talk about today. He is the CEO and founder of Bullpen. For those who don't know, Bullpen is really the only company I know out there specializing in identifying people who can work from anywhere at a high level, like analysts, senior analysts, CFO, that kind of thing, all focused on real estate. I think this is where the world's headed, whether we like it or not. Those of us who own office sometimes get a little nervous about it. But Tyler, welcome to The Real Market.
Hey, thanks so much, Chris.
Well, I don't know if I did justice to exactly what Bullpen is. So as we kick off here, why don't you tell the audience what Bullpen is as a company and the services you provide?
Yeah, sure. So our business is a place in which hiring people on a fractional basis on your team is super easy. This isn't a super new idea. If you look over the past 20 years, you've had platforms sort of like Upwork or platforms like Toptal, and they've come out and had offerings in which you can hire people on a freelance basis. However, as I was launching our business, I'll go sort of backwards. I started as an investor, and I was investing in properties, and I'd pass around offering memos, and I'd get a whole lot of questions around, how'd you do your offering package? I need some help with underwriting. Can you kind of hop in on this project? And I kind of hit me around 3 years ago. There's a lot of interest in kind of hiring people on a fractional basis. And how I started is as a more consulting practice. And I went out, hired a few analysts on my team. And then I realized that I was almost like holding us up as a consulting practice, because I was kind of checking over all the work, interacting with the customers. And if I went sort of backwards and I introduced the high quality people on our team, employers in the real estate industry, it was a really interesting business model. And over time, it evolved in which it had been a pure software play, and I can talk about that in all our kind of learning lessons if you want. And ended up pivoting over time into this sort of curated platform in which you can easily hire people on your team in.
Well, there's a lot of things you said here that are interesting that I want to kind of peel back. The first one that I think is most interesting, though, is the reason I found you and found Bullpen was I went on Twitter to the hashtag RE Twit community and said, hey, I'm really considering a work from anywhere analyst. What are the suggestions? And I got back Upwork, and I got a few others, but then a few people were very prominent and added you at Bullpen RE and said, you got to talk to Tyler. And then I just DM'd you, and you responded back. We started talking. And I want everyone to know we've hired somebody through your service, through Bullpen, and we're really excited about this person, a fully qualified, been in the business 15 years, can underwrite assets, underwrite leases. And, it does makes me a little concerned because that person is a work from anywhere. But after we went through the process and the interview process and willingness to travel if need be, maybe come to a company event, those kind of things, we kind of broke through it. And all of this happened because of Twitter and technology. So anybody who thinks that the answer is you pick up the phone and call Heidrichs and Struggles or any of the other recruiting firms out there, I'm saying I see a really different world. I mean, I don't know, just on that take, it's pretty interesting, don't you think?
It's super interesting, right? And I think how we hire is evolving over time. I mean, hiring is hard. I posted a job. I was talking about this over, I think, on LinkedIn recently, and in which I posted a job on a salesperson on our team, and I posted it on LinkedIn. I posted it on our platform, and I posted it on Indeed. On Indeed, I had over like 60 applicants in under like 2 hours, and they were all over the place on their qualifications, understanding of real estate. On LinkedIn, I posted it. It was interesting. I had around like 30 applicants in the first 24 hours, and then I didn't have any applicants at all. And I thought it was interesting how that kind of works in their sort of back end. I'd be curious, but and I was looking at the applicants, and there wasn't any real estate experience. All of them had kind of hiring experience, a little high level kind of sales experience, but it wasn't anything our team was looking for. On our platform, I posted it in 48 hours, had 10 highly qualified applicants, interviewed 3 people, extended an offer, and ended up hiring. And I think what's interesting about that is, how we hire, in the past, had been on places like LinkedIn, had been on these like large kind of houses of like job boards. However, the amount of processing of applicants is a huge headache. And there are businesses like ours who are sort of popping up and are sort of like taking all that kind of a headache and effectively sort of like packaging it in a product and offering it, and it's been working, which is cool.
Well, let me ask you this. So one of the things that we had to overcome was normally this position would have been a person about just out of college who had a master's or had some focus in finance. Didn't have to be an MBA, but it could have been an MBA. Probably the age of 22, 23 to 25. We would have paid them as a full-time employee plus the load. My thinking would always have been, okay, we're grooming this person and they're going to learn our culture and they're going to grow with us. But a couple of things that we've seen recently is every time we've done that, if we didn't have a position that was the next step up available, that person left. Hard to believe, but they left. The other was you're in constant battles over what the bonus should be and what this should be. And so when we first started, and you and I first started talking, and you started to get me to think about things about hours worked, like what exactly do you need in terms of hours worked? It was hard to pull off I expect them here at 8 o'clock and stay till 8 o'clock. And that meant that person was driving an hour and then they took a lunch. And so, if I ask my younger people who we still have on the team, who we will hopefully keep and they'll grow the company, they also look at it in that context. But that's not the same thing as hours worked. When you really drill down and say, hey, look, I need 4 hours of your time to go through this Argus, run through it, a bunch of different models, bunch of different variations. That 4 hours is a real 4 hours of work, which they will get paid for. It's not an 8-hour day of which 4 of it was work. And I mean, it opens up a whole lot of social issues and all of that. But at the end of the day, I've got some people that I really trust who really work hard, who needed support. We really didn't need a full-time person. And instead, we're getting someone with 15 years experience who will give us a focused, 40 or 80 hours a month or whatever it is we decide on. And I was just amazed. It's a long-winded speech I just gave you of, do you have to educate people on what you do as opposed to your average recruiter who will say, well, I got a list of 20 people and you should hire them and I full load, health, 401k. How do you educate your users?
Yeah, so there's a few things there I'll jump into, and I'll probably, it'll open up other questions. But I think a big hurdle in our business, a year and a half ago had been on education around, you don't have to hire a person in your office. It is okay to hire a person who is highly qualified and is in a place like Phoenix, Arizona, in place of LA or San Francisco. I think to a whole lot of employers, that was a real hard hurdle until April of last year, and everything in our country just sort of shut down with COVID. And as that happened, and all these employers had to sort of figure out in a matter of like days, how do we have our team who is in office, has all the security badges and all these various things, how do we kind of like do this if everyone is at home? And if you are hiring a person who is in LA but isn't in your office, it isn't a much sort of larger overall kind of leap to be hiring a person in Houston, Texas, or a person in Omaha, Nebraska, who is like highly qualified and isn't in your home office. And so I think the whole like education sort of component, it had been a hurdle, but as we sort of go, it isn't as huge of a hurdle. The other thing that is interesting is I have these conversations with people, and they say, "Hey, I'm interested in having a like headquarters and an actual team in our office." And I think it's an awesome idea. I don't think that our business is at all a kind of trade of having an actual sort of core team. I think in our business, as you know, Chris, there's over time, there's a whole bunch of actually of overall variability in your projects. You have seasons in which you have like 20 deals, and you're looking at them and you're trying to figure out if you want to purchase them. And then over the holidays or something, it might end up like dying out. And in your kind of like heavy times, avoiding like burnout is hugely important. And so hiring people who are highly qualified, have experience, and are able to kind of like hop in on your team on a fractional basis like that is a huge asset.
If I can stop you real quick, because I think those of us who have been around long enough and read Tim Ferriss's The 4-Hour Workweek quickly fell in love with that, and I was one of them. And I tried, Hey Linda, and some of these others to do per project things, and it just never worked. The learning curve was too different. There wasn't the specialization in real estate or an understanding of real estate. So I kind of forgot about it for a while. And obviously with COVID and the pandemic, we started focusing on this again. But one of the main reasons was not so much that, I don't want to say that we were leading the way, we weren't. It was that we were getting resumes from people who were insisting that they were only going to work either always remotely or just 1 or 2 days a week. And that led me to go do this. So to go find you. And I think what was amazing to us was the quality of the people on your platform.
Thanks.
And I just have to ask you, did we just get lucky that you kept one person to the side and say, hey, if someone I want to make sure gets a good one, that I'm going to make sure Chris gets it? Or how deep is your bench of people who can give 20 hours a week to a company or something like that?
That's an awesome question. And yeah, so there's around 2,000 individuals on the platform right now. And I sort of break them up half and half. I have half the people have like full-time jobs and are just kind of working on projects on the weekends. And as you were sort of launching, and it was only you and your partner, if you had a project and could hire a person who had worked at a place like Heinz, or is actually like full-time at a place like Heinz, has experience on all your project types in your actual areas, and you can hire them on a project only, that's a huge, huge asset for you. over, underwriting in Excel on your own and trying to figure out how the formulas work, or hiring a person on a full-time basis on your team who's like underpaid, isn't as qualified. Having that like high quality talent on that project basis is huge. As you get a bit kind of larger, have like larger teams and are interested in having like dedicated people, our other half of the platform is opened up, and it's individuals like Angela who had a full-time job and has all this experience and is interested in, almost kind of being an entrepreneur on her own. And, and is saying, hey, I want to have control over how I use my time. I'm not interested in, in a commute. However, I have all these abilities and all these talents. And, to hire a person like that who isn't employed elsewhere, is on your team, has your email address, is on your homepage if you want them to be.
Yep.
And is able to say, I'll invest like 20 hours in your business on an ongoing basis. That's a huge asset as well. And so how, I'd say half of our platform, answering your question, around half of them have like full-time jobs and are working on projects. Half of them are doing, entrepreneurs on a full-time basis. And then in those, you have this sort of like bell of experiences. And so I'd say around 20% of the people on our platform are more early career and have experience in the real estate industry under kind of 2 years, and are interested, and sort of in helping out in those more kind of like entry level roles. I'd say around like 80% of our talent is in that sort of like mid kind of level of in between anywhere from like 5 years to like 15 years of experience in operational roles, and then our upper kind of like 10% are old like CEOs of businesses, old like heads of things, and are able to come in and almost like audit your whole acquisitions business, and and say like, hey, I was working over like Brookfield, and here's how we had things sort of set up. Here's how I would change it if I were you. And so it's this huge range, but in our sort of core, our people in between kind of 5 years up to 15 years of experience.
What I find so interesting about it, and I want to make sure the audience understands, is our expectation and our agreement is that Angela is going to be on our weekly calls. So Wednesdays, the asset management team gets together. She'll be on that. We have a quarterly meeting event or even just a party. We're going to invite her out and have her be a part. So it's really a part of the team. It's just like our person who just in our Phoenix office, basically. And I think that's what's so remarkably different about what you're providing from Upwork. And nothing wrong. Upwork's a fine platform, but that's really like, hey, I have this project. I want you to do a study because I want to build a building somewhere and I need you. That's really what I found Upwork has done well. And I know you do that as well. But you're the only one I've seen in the real estate industry is that you are offering to people the opportunity that we are seeing a lot more of. Hey, I just don't want to go into an office, and I have a lot of talent and I'm willing to be on a team. And, from our perspective, you think about the cost savings of not having the overhead, and it's significant. And
it's huge.
And it's,
it's interesting too, right? You have these sort of like range of employees, like how you end up kind of solving issues in your business, and you have like full-time people on your team, and those people highly committed. They are in-house. They're in your face every day, and that is awesome. Over the past, I don't know, I was about to say over the past 100 years, but I don't know if it's 100 years or not. Your only other option have been like agencies in which you were outsourcing all your work. And there isn't a lot of like connection to who was actually doing it. And that's the thing I think like Upwork is awesome for. It isn't outstanding if you need like team members. It's outstanding if you have like a project and you want it to be, it to be like outsourced. Our platform is a kind of like hybrid in which our employers who hire actual team members on our platform are the actual happiest. It's people who sort of like see these people as actual like assets on their team, and not only a like agency in which I can outsource a project to here and there. It's person I work with on a consistent basis over time. I mean, our highest earning people on our platform, they have had clients over 2 years and have earned almost like $500,000 on those contracts. And I think it's just interesting the kind of like change of approach around kind of hiring these days, and sort of like how we are playing into that.
Well, let me ask you a few questions I asked you, because I think our audience will be interested. So what about what do I do about my non-disclosure agreements, and or what do I do about my licenses and all? Do I control this information? Do I own that information? Do I send somebody a computer? Do I just send them an Argus license? How do I deal with someone who's not an official employee, is a consultant, but still maintain all those, confidentiality agreements I have and all those kind of things?
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's a whole bunch of items in there, and I would just say as a like overall answer, it depends. However, I'll then kind of jump into kind of details here. Is that on kind of like tech licenses, on like NDAs, on any kind of like hardware, I'd be treating all these hires as employees. And so if you have an employee, have to sign like NDAs, I would have our people also do that. If you offer employees like Argus licenses, I would be offering Argus licenses on the people who have been like hired off our platform. Our big like value, as you did like highlight, is that whole sort of like back office headache around processing all the payroll and all your tax stuff and all that sort of mess over time. And so it isn't only, it's really, and as you asked, on the computers, it's up to you guys really. And so I had an employer out of LA actually, who just hired someone on a full-time contract over 6 months. And they're like publicly traded, and there's a bunch of actual security issues in their actual property types. And so having an actual computer that has been like blessed off the company, it was important. And so in this case, it was a company who offered a computer, and it was accepted, and it was fine. But on over like 90% of our placements, all of the like hardware, any computers, any assets are on the freelancer to bring. And any like NDAs or any kind of software licenses is on the employer to offer and provide.
It's an amazing thing about the cloud, right? I mean, when Argus was on a dedicated computer and that's all it was, this stuff didn't work. Now that you can do it on an enterprise basis, you can do it in the cloud. This kind of remote work, and that's one of the things I often talk about to people is if your mindset is, this is what it was like when I started working, so therefore that's what it was be like today, you might as well leave everything at the office and come in to work every day on a Saturday or whatever. It's just, the cloud has radically changed that and solves a lot of these security issues that you kind of think about, but you realize, wow, no, cloud solves that already. And that was a big learning curve. I think the biggest learning curve for us has been trying to define exactly how many hours someone really is doing work and to pull the ego out of it. I mean, we've all been there when we were young. Yeah, I worked 18-hour day, and then you kind of go through it and you realize, well, of my hard work and my focus work, it was more like 6. And I had some great camaraderie. I had a great lunch. We had a nice dinner, but those aren't really work hours. How do you advise people on that? I mean, like, how do you get them to start thinking about how many hours you really need?
It's interesting. I had done a study early on. This was years ago, and so it's old, and I'm not sure, if it's at all changed. But I had done a study on employers and employees and the average like productive hours on a weekly basis, and it was under 20 hours are actually productive on a weekly basis. And I thought that was like super interesting. The huge value of having a person in office, though, or even on a full-time basis, if it isn't in office, is an ability to say, hey, I have a project, it just sort of came up and I need help. And so to hire a person on a fractional basis over on a full-time basis, even on a contract, the sort of like risk is that you end up like losing out on that kind of like flexibility to say, hey, I had a project that like hit my desk. I need an offer in the next 4 days, and so I need underwriting today. And so it's that kind of like turnaround that's hard, and and that's as we see our customers who start on on like 20 hours a week on the contract, our customers who end up like hiring this person on a full-time basis are super interested in that ability, to have that turnaround. That isn't always possible if it's purely fractional. You asked me a question and I totally lost it. I don't know.
No, you were right on it. We have a little bit of feedback here, but hopefully we can get through it. But let me ask you this. Is Bullpen a tech company?
Great question. So, oh man, I could go on this for a long time. It is a tech-enabled service company. I had an interest in actually trying to raise money on this, and this is a little personal over the past like 3 to 4 months. Around like 4 months ago, I was like hating my life as an entrepreneur. I was burnout. I was doing a bunch of like fundraising pitches, and I was being just over. I was just like churned all the time, and I was kind of realizing I have a community group here that has you like older men in it, and I was opening up and just saying, guys, I'm just like burnout as an entrepreneur. It's only me on top. I have a team. However, I'm sort of carrying all the kind of like pain of, is this thing working or not? And I was then sort of told, you know what, Tyler, I think after kind of hearing you, you're sort of like playing this sort of like comparison game. In a place like San Francisco, in which you have all these like high tech companies and all these like VC rounds that are kind of huge. I had fallen in that kind of trap of sort of like comparing, our business and our operation, into all these like software operations like Facebook and places like Apple, and just sort of recognizing, that if you're always sort of comparing yourself into other businesses, it ends up kind of robbing all your joy. And so as you ask, am I a tech? Is this like tech? Our answer is like twofold. Our actual like software, how we onboard our customers, is like tech enabled. And so I kind of like built out our whole platform over time on my own. Effectively, I was our sort of chief engineer, and it is how we're able, to place an individual in a job in under like 48 hours is a function of our software. And so it is a really kind of like huge aspect of our business. Are we kind of like purely software in which, there isn't any human interaction and you can like hop on and just kind of like do everything on your own? I don't anticipate our business ever kind of pivoting into that. I had tried that, as I mentioned, around 2 years ago, and it was just an absolute train wreck. There ended up being a lot of a whole lot of like bidding, on our platform, and ended up like pushing the highest quality people who had higher prices out of opportunities, and it ended up sort of creating this overall quality issue on the platform. And so we ended up killing that earlier this year, and have had this like hybrid of our sales team and then our back end kind of software. And in our past like 4 to 5 months, it has just like taken off on us, which has been hugely fun. So that's our story.
Why don't you go a little bit into your background? Because I think the assumption may be that you majored in computer science at Stanford and you've been in the VC community and all that, because so much of your company does feel like a tech company, but that's not the case. So why don't you tell everybody what your background is and then how you moved into something that, whether it's a full-on tech company or not, is very tech reliant, very tech enabled.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So I started as an engineering major. I had done an industrial engineering degree on the East Coast, and I was interested in a job on Wall Street, and I was applying at a whole bunch of iBanks and that kind of stuff. And I trip over words. I have an impediment. If I get super anxious in these interviews, it'd be hard and even introducing myself. And so I had been kind of like chasing after money all this time. And I was applying for jobs on Wall Street after college. I didn't get any offers, ended up at GE, and I did that for a few years. And then after that, I had interest in IB still, ended up in SF at an actual bank on the West Coast, and had been in that for 2 years. I kind of like told myself I was raised sort of poor, and in that time I kind of like told myself if I was earning at least like X, I'd be happy. Ended up like earning that in this kind of banking role, and was just miserable. And I had started investing in real estate in undergrad. I purchased, a little kind of like townhouse. I was living there. I had some roommates. And I got kind of like hooked on it as an industry. And I told myself, you know what, I'm pretty sure I could raise a few dollars out of people on the West Coast interested in properties on the East Coast and help with that hurdle. And so after leaving IB, I went into a more acquisitions role, and I really only did that for about a year. And as I had alluded to earlier, had a whole lot of interest in our offering packages, our underwriting. There wasn't a lot of interest in the properties I was offering, and that's how we ended up pivoting into a more services business. I ended up kind of like teaching myself how to code in this, and that's how we ended up like building our platform, and our actual kind of software component. I got hooked on the whole tech industry as I've been out on the West Coast in a place like San Francisco, in which as you kind of walk around, you see like robots on the sidewalks, and you have all these vehicles on the road who are autonomous and all that kind of stuff. I got kind of like hooked on how do we turn this into an actual tech company, and that's how we got on the journey of our software solution, and that's how we sort of landed on this hybrid of our software sort of back end, and then our more kind of services like front end.
Yeah. It's a great story. Thank you for giving everyone the background. I can see why it's inspiring, being up there in San Francisco, having spent a lot of my life up there as well. I will tell you, I went to my first Amazon Go store up there, to the financial district. I'm still convinced someone's going to come and arrest me for shoplifting, but it was a great experience. Said it was a healthy 7-Eleven, and I didn't have to take my wallet out to pay for anything, but I didn't get charged. But
it is interesting. The stuff, sort of trials up here. I was walking over in FiDi pretty recently, and there was it was a truck that had sort of coffee and a bunch of bagels in it, and it was all a whole bunch of like robots, and they were sort of doing everything and hearing orders and then processing it, and it was really fascinating.
That's cool. So when you look at the last few months that you went through, and now you're in a good place, how do you balance things? You're a young father, right? And and so it's a little different perspective on life. You've got all the stresses that any founder and CEO has. What is it that you're incorporating in your life to balance things?
Oh, good question. And I'm not sure I'm super awesome at it. I think a really huge help is all those VC kind of pitches I did ended up kind of falling apart, and so I don't have the kind of pressure of these like VCs on me. I know a lot of entrepreneurs, especially after kind of fundraising, they have to end up like hitting the gas, or everything kind of falls apart on them. And our business is in a awesome place in that it is a profitable business as it is. And so having kind of fundraising and that stuff isn't anything that is adding kind of pressure on us, on our team. The other thing that I try and do on a consistent basis, and I've gotten okay at it, is I try to halt all my kind of like daily projects around like 4:00, and have like family time in between like 4 and around like 8, and then anything else, if it's urgent, I end up kind of like hopping on after that and just handling it. However, to have like family time like that has been huge, and I think having Harrison, who is now almost 8 months, he having an actual child, just it kind of changes how you kind of think about life. And I wasn't a really huge sort of kid person. I wasn't ever interested in really kind of having kids, and it was always a thing that I told myself it would end up happening in kind of 5 years. I was always sort of kicking it up the road, and then it ends up happening, and you're like, holy smokes, this is incredible, and it's hard, and it's humbling, and it's everything sort of pulling you. And so I think just having a lot of patience, and also understanding, if you can sort of build a actual team and it ends up taking the pressure off of you as an entrepreneur, I think that's the sort of like holy grail of.
Well, how do you interact with your team? A lot of people Microsoft Teams has become a platform for a lot of people. Google Workspace, though, it doesn't have the functionality quite that Teams does. We're a huge user of Asana, and how we've written interactive PDFs for our company on how we use Asana and the things, the expectations. But how do you manage? I mean, I can't imagine you run your business off an email, doing email back and forth. You must have some sort of system in place. What do you all do?
Yeah, so everything's kind of software based. As I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier in our chat or in a prior call. Our team is all over the country, and so I have people in LA, I have people in the Midwest, and I have people out on the East Coast. And to have everyone in office isn't all possible for us. And so I've used Asana on our team, on our project management, on our kind of like high level sort of projects around sort of business like building. A whole lot of our kind of like daily overall management of our customers is in like HubSpot, and that's our sort of CRM of choice.
That's ours too.
It is, okay, yeah. No, it's interesting. I ended up on their like entrepreneur plan or something, and in which it's like cheaper for the first year, and then it's more expensive in year 2, and then it's hugely expensive in year 3. And I'm in the first year there and trying to figure out how it kind of looks in our future years. But in between like HubSpot and then our sort of custom software, in which it's kind of managing our actual contracts with our customers and all the freelancers in the pool and us posting jobs and posting interviews and that kind of stuff. Everything's virtual. So yeah, it's how your business works effectively. Everyone's in these tools and sort of bringing it all together.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your product. I had the experience, and the person who runs this effort for us had the experience of signing up because we were seeking talent. And I think that was a very seamless process. It was done very easy. But I think it would be really interesting to the audience is, let's just say someone's in the business for 30 years. I mean, for not 30 years, they're 30 years old. They've been in the business for quite a while. Sure. They've got real skill set around things. Let's start with, what can someone who has gone from maybe a full-time associate level analyst job, either acquisitions or asset management, what amount of money can they expect if we're just making the assumption they're qualified? And right. It would be not a per project, but more full-time. What can somebody make, and how do they get themselves signed up into the system and brand themselves a little bit to be sought after?
Yeah, no, that's outstanding. And so our platform has a really easy onboarding process. As you experience on the employer side, we have one on the freelancer side, and it asks a few kind of like high level questions about all their past experience in their various sectors, any sort of project talents. Are they pros in underwriting or on like lease analysis and all those various things? There's over like 50 of them. And then we ask them, to input an actual LinkedIn profile, which then helps us verify all their talents and past experience. And then input their pricing. And there's almost like 2 ways of interacting with us. You have like active people on our platform who, as we post opportunities, are applying and saying, hey, I'm super interested, I'm highly qualified, here's how I am. Our actual postings have actual sort of custom questions, and then also are asking to have a bunch of like work samples too. And so, if you answer all the questions, and then, if it's an underwriting project, if you have any sort of sample underwriting, adding that is a real huge help in being kind of hired. On the more kind of sort of passive side, our platform now has around 2,000 people on it who have actual profiles. However, they aren't actually applying for jobs on a real active basis. And I think how that plays out is if an employer like you is like, hey, I have a project in a place like Omaha, and I don't have any talent. In Omaha, I have a real like high level understanding of how the market kind of works. However, it would be awesome if you had a high quality expert who is in a place like Omaha, who has experience in that kind of local market. Having all these profiles on our platform, it allows us to say, okay, I need a person in Omaha who knows underwriting of like offices and has at least like 5 years of experience, and then it ends up like populating options for us, and then I can reach out and say, hey, Allison, I have an employer who is super interested in a person in Omaha who has office experience. Are you interested in a phone call on this opportunity? So I think like having our more sort of active and then our more sort of passive users is a really awesome asset for us.
I agree with the things you said. I think one of the things I found interesting is I had a conversation with my YPO forum, and what I found interesting were the questions that my friends were asking me, because it was almost as though they couldn't believe that this is real. Things like, well, what happens if you get bad work product? And I said, well, we would work with that person, and just like we would if the person was sitting at a desk right next to us, and say this is acceptable, and if you're not going to continue this, we won't hire you. I got another one like, well, how do you know that person's great? Well, we interviewed them just like we would anywhere else. Well, what if the expectations are different? Well, we have we call it an accountability chart of what the roles is. So there's something, it could be just generational. Maybe there's not a whole lot of 28-year-olds saying that this is an issue, but there's a whole lot of 50-year-olds who were like, it just seems so different. But when you really break down the process, it was the same hiring process. I think we even had Angela we do these caliper tests and these things, just like if she was sitting right here. And we've talked about to finalize things like, okay, if she flies out and comes to an in-person meeting, what that cost is. But that's just a agreement. And so I was really amazed how similar it was to just hiring a young analyst that would sit in the office every day. And I expect we probably would have all the same things. If work product doesn't get done, you terminate that person the same way you terminate someone in-house. And
yeah, and I think the huge advantage here and is around almost like trying out employees over hiring them on a full-time basis. On a person like Angela, or how often are you able to say, hey, I'm going to like hire this person on this like project or over the next like 3 months on a contract that is like 80 hours a month or is like 40 hours a month, and I'm going to try them out. And then if everything sort of clicks, I'll then offer them, a proper kind of full-time job in our business, and I'll sort of pull them off the platform. I think it's very hard to, on any like hiring agency or any other kind of like interview process, there isn't any kind of tryout. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, I have this like resume, and I've had a few conversations with this person, and I trust them with this huge project I'm working on, or this huge hire in our business. I think an ability to actually try out a person and then offer them a job on a full-time basis, or say, you know what, hey, I've enjoyed this. It isn't an awesome sort of fit culturally, or your talents aren't exactly there, and then try someone else. That's huge, right?
So, well, what I found very comfortable in the process was you clearly have a real estate background. The people that you have on the platform clearly have a real estate background. And I think that's the difference between hiring on LinkedIn or Indeed or some of these others, is that they're not they're not specialists. And I
Right.
had great faith because we kicked the tires, we went through it. And I think
Yeah.
that's it. I mean, AI will do a lot. There's a lot of things we can do, but at the end of the day, if you as the founder don't understand what I, as a founder of a real estate operating company, needs, it wouldn't work. But you do, and so I'm really excited about this going forward. I do have my concerns that wow, what does this do to the 22, 23-year-old? Is this the new economy where they won't get that in-house apprenticeship job and all of that? Because the difference in price and the difference in how we work is so acute that this seems like a much better option. Maybe we'll change our mind down the road, but I don't see any economic incentive to building up a big real bullpen of analysts that sit here that I pay for. I'd rather go to Bullpen and say, I need 20 hours on this project, or I need someone for 40 hours a month. And if we need a little bit more, we'll pay a little bit extra. I just think that's the future, and I think you're riding that horse. And I congratulate you that you're out front.
Oh, thanks so much. It's interesting on your kind of like earlier point about us like honing on the real estate industry. I had a VC I was talking to early on, and I was pitching him, and he said, "Okay, Tyler, I have an idea. I think like real estate is an awesome business, but there's huge industries too. If you start in real estate and then you can like branch out into all these other industries, it could be this huge business." And I told him, I think the true like magic of our business is it's all real estate. And if you do anything else, it ends up like killing our sort of magic, And so our approach with this business, our intentionality, our real like long, sort of vision is being in the real estate industry. And I think it is what, ends up sort of raising us over your other options like Upwork or other hiring options. So,
well, sorry, my little audio problem, but hey, this has been such a fantastic conversation, and I'm looking forward to coming back maybe in a year and just say, hey, this is how our experience unfolded, and to see your growth. But before I do that, a lot of times people will put things in the bio questions and all, but I just got to ask, what is regenerative agriculture or farming? I don't get many people who throw that in as an interest, and I just have to know. I got to get smarter.
Have you ever like heard that kind of term before?
Not really, not around agriculture or farming. I thought by its very nature it was regenerative, but this is a little different.
So I'm not a farmer. I'll say this, audience, I'm not a farmer. I don't have any background in it, anything. And so if I say anything and you're like, this guy's an idiot on farming, that is okay. So there's a huge problem on our planet, and that is the kind of like the amount of actual carbon in our atmosphere. Everyone's aware of it. Everyone kind of talks about it, and there's a whole bunch of actual conversations about it. However, like farming is a way of sort of like capturing it and then so putting it in the soil. But how we're sort of farming at the moment, in which there's these huge like acreages of only things like corn, only things like soybeans, only things like wheat, it ends up hurting our sort of like topsoil. And the idea is a more kind of like optimal way of actual farming is in this like hybrid approach of having a whole bunch of actual plants. It isn't only corn, or it isn't only soybeans, and then adding in like animals, and so adding in sort of cows and everything on your farm. And there's been a few high level sort of research projects on it, and that it increases the overall profitability of these like farming operations on average like 70%. As you are integrating other crops, other plants, and that kind of stuff. And so I am not a pro at anything involving kind of farming. I just think it is it is a real like innovative approach on this old practice, in which I think it'll have this really awesome impact on our planet in the future. So,
well, it's interesting because I would say that Bullpen is a really cool approach to something that's been around a long time, which is placing people in jobs. And so there's a little synergy there between those two concepts. So, I mean, Tyler, this is a really interesting conversation. I encourage people to reach out to you and to your company. I definitely think this is going to be one of those arrows in the quiver, as my former mentor used to say. You got to have a lot of arrows in that quiver. And I think having people who don't necessarily come into work 40 hours a week, but actually are part of that team in a very integrative way. And I think your company is really out on the edge. So, Tyler, thanks for being on The Real Market. I really appreciate it.
Hey, well, thanks so much. This was awesome, Chris.
All right.
And please don't forget to follow us. We'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to the podcast. You can do that on Apple iTunes or any of the other podcasting services. It's The Real Market with Chris Rising. And follow us on Twitter at Chris Rising or at RisingRP. And please follow our blog, chrisrising.com or risingrp.com. Thanks so much.
This episode of The Real Market is brought to you by Rising Investor Platform. The platform provides accredited investors with exclusive real estate investment opportunities on a deal-by-deal basis across various asset classes, including office, industrial, hospitality, multifamily, and data. The platform also provides an inside look at deals in our pipeline while giving investors the chance to indicate interest before it's too late. We recently funded our acquisition of 9320 Telstar, a mixed-use office industrial property in El Monte, California, using our investor platform. To learn more about how accredited investors can join the Rising Investor Platform, please visit risinginvestorplatform.com.